There are loves that save and loves that destroy, even when they come from the same heart. Being a mother or father doesn't mean carrying everything your child refuses to face or becoming the shield that keeps them from growing. Sometimes, helping isn't love, it's surrender. And every time you do it without weighing the cost, you're not only weakening them, you're also forgetting yourself. Here's an uncomfortable truth. There are situations where loving well means stepping back, staying silent, or simply not getting involved. And even though that may hurt, sometimes it's the only way to regain the respect, peace, and dignity the relationship has worn down over time. In this video, we're going to explore 7 moments when you shouldn't help your adult child if you truly love them, and if you truly love yourself. And believe me, the final lesson might completely change how you understand your role as a mother, as a father, and as a human being who's no longer willing to disappear in the name of love. I'm Gabriel, and if you've ever felt stuck between love and exhaustion, stay with me. Because what we're about to reflect on today might just bring you back to the center you didn't even realize you'd lost. Have you ever wondered if love can become a form of surrender? Not the heroic kind, the kind celebrated in books, but a quiet, slow surrender that pulls you under without you even noticing. Giving your adult child money when you know they can earn it themselves may seem like an act of compassion, but more often than not, it's a way of denying yourself. You're not helping. You're paying the price for a guilt that isn't yours, or worse, trying to buy affection that should no longer be conditional. This is the first of the 7 points we're going to cover today. When they ask you for money, you know they don't really need, because we're not talking about genuine need, urgent situations, or exceptions. We're talking about that routine disguised as an emergency, that child who always has a reason, an excuse, a story to hold out their hand, while you keep shrinking your own plans, your own dreams, your own rights. And you do it repeating the same sentence like a curse. He's my son, how could I not help him? But the real question isn't whether you can help him, it's whether you should. Because behind every bill you hand over without question, there's a part of you that disappears. You're not educating, you're not supporting, you're not strengthening that bond. You're allowing it to become a burden, one he won't release and you don't dare cut loose. I remember Rosa, a woman who wrote to me from Houston. She was 72, lived alone, and had worked herself to the bone for decades as a nurse. With every pension check, she sent a portion to her youngest son, a 48-year-old man, healthy, educated, and fully capable of working. Rosa said she did it because he couldn't find a job that truly valued him. But while she waited for the world to value her son, it was she who kept giving, her effort, her peace, and her money, in return for nothing. One day, Rosa got sick. Nothing serious, but enough to need someone by her side for a few hours. Her son said he couldn't. He had a job interview. And for the first time in years, something broke inside her. That afternoon, it wasn't the relationship that broke. It was the illusion, the idea that she was helping out of love, when in reality she was sustaining a relationship where only one side gave, yielded, and slowly disappeared. Epictetus said that we are not responsible for the actions of others, but we are responsible for what we allow through our own. And allowing your adult child to live as if they still depend on you when they already have the tools to stand on their own is a way of prolonging their weakness and your needless sacrifice. This isn't a call to indifference. I'm not telling you to close your heart. I'm telling you to protect it, to put love at the service of truth, not fear. Because many times, the money you give isn't out of generosity. It's out of fear they'll pull away, judge you, or stop speaking to you. And if that's the price of the relationship, then what you have isn't a son. It's an emotional manipulator who's learned that you'll always say yes. Think of it this way. Every time you give without need, you're reinforcing the idea that they don't have to grow up. You're keeping them from suffering what they need to suffer to mature. You're denying them the right to become strong because you've chosen to be their eternal crutch. And maybe the time has come to stop being a crutch, to become a mirror, a steady mirror that reflects back their adult self, not to rescue them, not to save them, but to confront them with who they really are and who they could become if they dared to walk alone. This is just the beginning. What comes next may hurt more, but it can also heal more. Stay with me. Because the second moment when you shouldn't help your child might be the most revealing of all, especially if you want to reclaim the respect you've lost without even realizing it. Sometimes we believe that love means shielding others from all pain. But there are pains that teach more than 1,000 words ever could, and keeping someone from facing them doesn't protect them. It condemns them. We've already seen how money, when mishandled in a relationship with an adult child, can become a double-edged sword. But there's a more subtle and sometimes more dangerous form of misunderstood help, stepping into conflicts your child created as if they were your own. This brings us to the second key point of this video, when they want you to fix a mess they made. We're not talking about real emergencies or genuine requests for guidance. We're talking about those moments when your child comes to you overloaded with problems they caused themselves, whether through irresponsibility, pride, or a lack of self-awareness, and throws them on your lap as if you were the one responsible for making things right. They want you to call for them, confront their partner, explain their behavior to others, clean up the mess every time they stumble over their own decisions. Pause for a moment and think about it. How many times have you gotten involved in arguments that weren't yours? How many times have you lost your peace trying to fix things they should be facing with maturity? And how many times have you justified the unjustifiable just to spare them from suffering? The answer, if you're being honest, might make you uncomfortable. But that discomfort holds a key. You've confused your role. You're not here to save them from their life. You're here to live your own with dignity and clarity. The Stoics warned about control as a dangerous illusion. Marcus Aurelius said it clearly, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. But when you take on someone else's mistakes as your own, you deny that wisdom. You act as if your child can't think for themselves, can't learn, can't grow from their own missteps. And the saddest part is, they start to believe it too. This doesn't just drain your emotional energy. It wears down your body, your days, your sense of confidence. Constant exposure to other people's drama becomes a slow poison. Your nights fill with anxiety, conversations turn into battlegrounds, and your peace of mind fades away. And the cruelest part? When the conflict is finally resolved, if it ever is, you vanish from the picture. No one thanks you. No one notices your exhaustion. And then you're left with that quiet loneliness, that feeling of having given everything only to end up in the same place, tired and alone. There's an image that might help you. Imagine you're in the middle of the ocean, on a fragile raft. Your child swims toward you, asking for help, but they're not drowning. They just don't want to swim anymore. If you pull them onto your raft, you both go under. If you make them swim, they get angry. What do? The Stoic answer is simple and profound. You stay firm. You tell them you believe in them, that they can swim, that the water they fear today might be the same water that makes them stronger tomorrow. Love isn't measured by how much pain you prevent, it's measured by how much courage you inspire. If every time your child causes a conflict, you rush in to save them, you're not just taking away their chance to grow. You're agreeing to always put your own well-being last. And at this stage in your life, that's no longer a noble sacrifice. It's a quiet betrayal of yourself. You're not here to be anyone's shield. You're here to live in truth. And sometimes, the hardest truth you can give your child is, you got yourself into this. Now it's your turn to face it. Let it hurt, if it has to. Let them be angry if they need to, because if they truly love you, they'll come to understand that this boundary was an act of deeper love than any rescue could ever be. I want you to really think about it. How many fights have you been dragged into that weren't yours? How many times has your presence delayed growth instead of bringing calm? And more importantly, how many more times are you going to deny yourself just because you're afraid of your child facing the life they chose? It's time to reclaim your center. What comes next may be even harder to accept, but it's also more necessary. Because when love turns into obligation, it stops being love and becomes a burden. Stay with me. This is just getting started. Up to now, we've talked about the mistakes we make when we step in where we shouldn't. But there's a more subtle point, more emotionally tangled, that many older people repeat without even realizing it. It's when the relationship with your child is no longer based on trust, but on the fear of losing them. This brings us to the third point in this video, when they use emotional blackmail to make you take responsibility. And maybe you don't call it that. Maybe you see it as concern, as sensitivity, as need. But if you stop and look closely, you'll notice a pattern. They do something, you feel guilty, they hide in your weakness, and you end up giving in. Not because you want to, but because you're afraid they'll pull away, judge you, or say you don't love them enough. This pattern doesn't appear overnight. It's built over years of silence, of giving in, of phrases like, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." And while they sound sweet, they're weapons. Soft weapons that gradually erode your freedom and your peace of mind. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things start to shift, because I want to offer something different. Stop responding with guilt and start responding with steady presence. What does that mean? That the next time your child uses pain, drama, or subtle threats to get you to do something you don't want to do, don't react right away. Breathe. Take a step back and ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? That single question, if answered honestly, can give you a clarity you've been avoiding for years. The Stoics said the soul grows stronger when it learns to separate what it feels from what it decides. You are not a slave to your emotions. You can feel compassion, anxiety, or sadness, and still say no. And that no might be the most loving thing you ever say, because it breaks the cycle of blackmail and restores your dignity. To make this work, you need to practice it. Don't wait for the next manipulative scene. Start today with small things. If they ask for something that makes you uncomfortable, say, "I'll think about it." If they try to hurt you with a subtle comment, respond with silence. If they say, "No one else understands me like you do," reply with a simple truth. "I don't need to carry what's not mine to prove I love you." At first, it will be hard. They'll get angry. They'll make you feel guilty. But over time, they'll learn that your love isn't the same as obedience. And you'll feel something you haven't felt in years: self-respect. I remember the case of Mariana, a 67-year-old woman who wrote to me from Peru. Her son, divorced and unemployed, had moved into her home under the excuse of just staying for a short while. That short while turned into a year, and every time Mariana hinted that she needed her space, he'd hit her with hurtful lines like, "You're kicking me out. You have no heart. You always choose others over me." For months, Mariana gave in. Until one day, exhausted, she wrote 3 sentences on a piece of paper and placed it on her nightstand. She repeated them every morning like a ritual. "I'm not responsible for your life. My peace is not for sale. I am stoic." That's when she found the strength to speak to her son firmly, not out of anger, but out of clarity. And for the first time, he realized his mother wasn't a shadow or an emotional servant. She was a woman with the right to live in peace. If you're also tired of a dynamic that repeats and drains you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Not to grow the audience, but to grow your inner voice. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and write the phrase, "My peace is not for sale." I want to know who's here because they've decided to stop being the emotional support for those unwilling to change. Stay with me because what's coming might help you recover much more than your energy. It might bring you back to the center you were never meant to lose. And don't forget, the final lesson will be the most uncomfortable, but also the most transformative. When you start setting boundaries, the world around you shakes. And it doesn't shake because you're doing something wrong. It shakes because, for the first time, you're doing something different. We saw this in the last point. Breaking free from emotional blackmail isn't an act of selfishness, it's an act of liberation. But that liberation needs consistency, because there's an older, sneakier trap that can catch you just when you think you've regained your center. It's the belief that your role in your child's life is permanent, absolute, and that as their mother or father, you're also responsible for the consequences of their personal choices. And that brings us to the fourth point, when their love life or family problems become your responsibility. Maybe it sounds familiar. He argues with his partner and you end up playing mediator. She leaves the house and you're the one watching the grandkids around the clock. He makes a poor decision and you're the one stepping in, justifying, fixing things. But he doesn't ask you with words. He does it through silence, through absence, through that look that seems to say, if you don't step in, everything will fall apart. And you, out of habit, loyalty, or fear, you do it. Not because you agree, but because you can't stand to see him suffer. And without realizing it, his life becomes an extension of your own. What should have been occasional support turns into a draining routine, where you stop existing as a person and become an invisible support system, indispensable, yet always put last. This mistake doesn't show up suddenly. It creeps in slowly. It starts with just this once, continues with, "I'll do it because no one else can," and ends in, "If I don't do it, who will?" It's a mechanism fueled by guilt, by fear of judgment, and by a deeply misunderstood idea of maternal love. Because you were taught that to love is to give yourself away, and that the more worn out you are, the more valuable you become. But that's not love. That's self-abandonment. What you're giving isn't companionship. It's your time, your energy, your peace, with no return. Stoic philosophy teaches that what happens outside of you isn't yours. Epictetus put it bluntly, "Keep away from what doesn't depend on you without regret." And your adult child, with their relationships, breakups, and family decisions, is no longer a child. They are a complete human being, capable of making mistakes and owning them. Every time you step in to shield them from pain, you're pushing them back into childhood. You're saying, without words, that they can't handle their own life. And at the same time, you're telling yourself that you can't handle yours unless you're fixing theirs. The consequences run deep. You lose hours, days, weeks to problems that aren't yours. Your home stops being a place of peace and becomes an extension of someone else's chaos. Your body begins to protest, you sleep worse, eat anxiously, feel like you can't breathe in your own space. And the worst part isn't even that. The worst part is that you start to believe that this is your role, that if you're not fixing something, you have no worth, that if you're not sacrificing, you don't exist. And once that belief takes root, it kills any chance of spiritual awakening, personal growth, or real dignity. Because while you're busy fixing your child's life, who's fixing yours? While you're making sure their kids are okay, who's taking care of your body, your rest, your soul? While you're holding together a family that isn't yours, who's holding your silence, your faith, your center? No one, because no one else can, because that's your work and yours alone. And if you don't start putting yourself first, no one else will. This point isn't about cutting ties. It's about healing them, about remembering that love also means letting the other person face their own life, just like you faced yours, and that your right to live in peace, to rest, to grow old with dignity is not negotiable. Not with your children, not with your grandchildren, not with anyone's bad decisions. Because old age is not a second round of parenting. It's a sacred stage that you deserve to live with respect and freedom, not exhaustion and invisibility. And if someone doesn't understand that, it's because they still haven't learned what you already know, that love isn't proven by disappearing. It's proven by standing firm in the middle of the noise, with your head held high and your soul wide awake. We've reached the 5th point in this video, and what I'm about to say might hurt more than anything you've heard so far. Because it's not about a big argument or a visible conflict or some major decision. It's about a silent pattern that slowly drains your time, your energy, and your dignity. And it's this: when they expect you to be available at all times because you're their mother. This idea, repeated without question, has robbed thousands of women of their peace. Women growing old believing they no longer have the right to say no. That if they're not always there, they're failing. That if they don't respond, they're letting someone down. That if they choose themselves, they're betraying the sacred role society gave them like a burden. The eternal mother, the one who gives everything, who never gets tired. But let me say this as clearly as it needs to be said. If your child needs you to erase yourself in order to feel loved, then they don't love you the way you think they do. They're using you. Maybe not out of malice, maybe not even consciously, but with a cruel convenience that you've allowed for years. And not because you're weak, but because of a mix of blind loyalty, inherited guilt, and a false spirituality that confuses sacrifice with love. Because someone, somewhere, convinced you that being constantly available was your greatest virtue, and you believed it, and you lived it, and now you're paying the price. The consequences are visible but hard to admit. Frustration becomes your quiet companion. Every time you cancel a plan, every time you cut your rest short, every time you put aside something you enjoy to meet a non-urgent demand, you lose a piece of yourself. Your child doesn't respect you more for it. In fact, they learn that you have no boundaries, that your time always belongs to them, that your life is an extension of theirs. And when someone starts to believe that, they stop seeing you as a person. They see you as a function, as a resource, as an app running in the background, always responsive, even if no one's looking at the screen. But you can rewrite this story. Not out of anger, not out of complaints, not from bitterness. You can change it with one word that holds enormous power: enough. You've done enough. You've given enough. You've proven enough. You don't need to keep fading away so someone else can feel comfortable. You have the right to close the door, to silence the phone, to say, "Not today." And not because you're selfish, but because you're human. Because you've run out of time to keep putting off what keeps you grounded. Because you deserve to live this stage of life with the peace of someone who's learned how to care without disappearing, how to love without losing herself, how to be present without giving everything away. This change won't be easy. Letting go of a role you've carried for decades is like leaving a house you've lived in your whole life. It's uncomfortable, it's painful, but it's also urgent. Because if you don't do it, no one else will. And if you keep waiting for your child to understand without you ever speaking up, to respect your time without you defending it, you'll die exhausted. And worst of all, no one will even realize how much you gave, because you gave so much for so long that no one sees it as love anymore. They see it as your job. Respect is not begged for, it's cultivated. And it begins the moment you decide to treat yourself with the same importance you've always given others. Today can be that day. Not to change everything overnight, but to take the first step, to start naming your time, your space, your boundaries. And to remember, every time guilt tries to manipulate you, that your peace is not for sale, that your life still belongs to you, that true love doesn't ask you to break yourself apart. It asks you to bloom, even if it makes those who are used to seeing you worn out feel uncomfortable. After years of being available to everyone but yourself, of putting other people's problems ahead of your own inner peace, of saying yes when you wanted to say no, there comes a point when your body and soul present the bill. We talked about it in the previous chapter. You can't keep living as if your time has no value, as if rest is a luxury, as if your worth is measured by how many favors you do for people who no longer even look at you with gratitude. But the urgency doesn't stop there. Because once you decide to start putting yourself first, life is going to test you. It won't be easy. And that's why we've reached a crucial point. The sixth. It's when you give advice that wasn't asked for and that they have no intention of listening to. This gesture, which seems harmless, is one of the most common ways of staying trapped in the very pattern you're trying to break. You think that if you explain it well enough, if you reason with them, if you guide them, they'll change. But they don't. They ignore you, or snap at you, or accuse you of not understanding. And instead of stepping back, you keep trying. Because you want to help. Because it hurts to see them lost. Because you're still clinging to the illusion that you can steer them in the right direction. But here's a truth that might sting more than any rejection. If your adult child hasn't asked for your advice, your intervention will feel like interference. And every time they reject it, you won't just feel unheard, you'll feel disrespected. That wound, built up over the years, either leads you to go silent out of resignation or to keep pushing out of desperation. Either way, you lose energy. Either way, you lose yourself. Picture this. On a random day, your child starts complaining about their partner, their job, their health. You, drawing from your own experience, offer a suggestion. You look at them with calm and patience and say something you truly believe is helpful. And what do you get? A dry silence, or criticism, or a cold phrase, "You don't get it. Things were different in your time." And you swallow your words. You swallow your sadness. You swallow the feeling of having offered your best for nothing. That moment isn't small. It's a brutal mirror that shows you something hard to face. Not everyone is willing to listen. Not everyone wants to grow. Not everyone values the voice of the one who once held them up. If you keep trying, you enter a spiral that wears you down. You feel frustrated, powerless, abandoned. You start believing you failed as a mother. That if they don't listen, it must mean you didn't teach them well enough. But that's a lie. Their life is theirs. Their blindness is theirs. And your job is not to force them to see. It's to let go of the need to be heard by someone who's closed their ears. Because if you keep chasing validation from people who only come to you when they need saving, you'll end up alone, tired, and full of words that never landed. Stoicism reminds us of a simple but powerful lesson. What's not within your control doesn't deserve your suffering. Your child has the right to make mistakes, to fall, to drift away, and you have the right to stay silent, to observe, to walk away with dignity once you've given all you can. Sometimes the wisest move isn't to speak louder, it's to hold a firm silence. That silence isn't indifference, it's self-respect. It's recognizing that you can't force someone else to change. It's knowing your value isn't measured by how many people listen to you, but by how faithful you are to your truth, even if no one acknowledges it. The hardest part of this point is that it seems small, but it reveals everything about the relationship. Because if you can't stop talking to someone who doesn't listen, then you're still trapped. And if you're still trapped, you haven't fully awakened. But you can. You can stop explaining what you've already shown with your life. You can stop seeking approval from someone who refuses to see you. You can turn your words into an offering, not a plea. Because your experience matters. Your wisdom matters. And if someone doesn't receive it, then they're the ones missing out on what you've already earned. The peace of no longer needing to convince anyone in order to live freely. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized something essential. Every time you try to maintain a relationship that doesn't respect you, you're the one paying the price. It's not symbolic, it's real. You pay with your time, your energy, your health, and with that quiet feeling that you're living someone else's life while your own fades in silence. We talked about this in the last point. Giving advice to someone who doesn't want to hear it isn't wisdom, it's self-destruction. But there's an even deeper and more dangerous way to give yourself up. And that's when, without even noticing, you begin to give up your own desires, your own pleasures, your own dreams, just to avoid making your child uncomfortable. This brings us to the 7th point in this video, when you give up your own dreams or routines so they won't feel bad. This behavior is one of the quietest, but also one of the most destructive, because it doesn't come from a direct demand. It comes from constant self-censorship. You choose not to travel because he might need you. You don't take that course because it might upset him. You don't buy that book, don't go to that gathering, don't start that project, because you're afraid your happiness will be seen as selfishness, as abandonment, as a lack of love. And so, without anyone openly asking, you begin to shrink yourself. You dim the part of you that still wants to explore, discover, be surprised. Until one day, you wake up and realize you haven't just stopped living. You've stopped hoping. That's the trap, believing that constant self-sacrifice is love. But it's not. It's a way of dying while still alive. Because real love isn't built on invisible sacrifices, it's built on mutual respect. And if you have to hide your joy so your child won't feel insecure, then you're stuck in a relationship that feeds their comfort at the expense of your fulfillment. Seneca said it clearly, life is not short, we just waste it. And often, we shorten it every time we put off what makes us feel alive just because someone else might not like it. There's no gentle way to say this. No one is going to give you back what you're letting slip away. No one's going to write that book for you. No one's going to take that walk for you. No one's going to listen to that music, try that recipe, join that workshop. If you decide it's not worth it, that now's not the right time, that it's better to wait until everything is calm. But let me ask you something, as bluntly as this moment deserves. How much longer are you going to wait? How many more times are you going to give yourself up for someone who won't even look at you with gratitude, let alone give back a little of what you've given your whole life? At this point, it's not just about relationships. It's about your soul, about your right to be the main character of this stage in your life, about the real possibility of getting excited about something that's just for you. Because if you don't allow yourself that, if you keep making yourself smaller so others won't feel bad, then you'll have been a mother, a caregiver, a peacemaker, but never truly yourself. And at this point, that's an unforgivable betrayal. What I'm telling you isn't meant to place blame. It's meant to help you see that if you don't claim your space, no one will. If you don't give yourself permission to grow, no one will hand it to you. And if you don't start prioritizing the things that still bring you joy, then you'll be alive. But you won't really be living. You don't need grand gestures. You just need one step. Any step. But make it yours. Because time doesn't stop, and the life you have left can't keep being an endless postponement. Freedom begins when you stop asking for permission to exist, and you, more than anyone, have already earned the right to do just that. What you just heard isn't a theory, it's a warning a firm signal for those who keep postponing self-respect in the name of a misunderstood love. Making it this far doesn't make you a spectator. It makes you someone who dared to face what most people spend their lives avoiding. Because there's nothing more uncomfortable than realizing we've been complicit in our own exhaustion. But there's also nothing more liberating than admitting with clarity that the power to change is in our hands. Not in our children's hands, not in our circumstances, not in the passing of time. Here and now, the real work begins with you. If you've listened all the way through, I want you to write it in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from, and I want you to share, in your own words, this simple but powerful phrase. I no longer abandon myself. Because that is the root of everything we've talked about today. This isn't about cutting ties. It's about no longer breaking yourself. It's not about stopping the love you give. It's about starting to love yourself too. And if you say that phrase with real intention, it can draw the line between quiet resignation and a later life lived with dignity, with purpose, and with peace. My name is Gabriel, and this space, the Stoic Garden, exists for one clear reason. Because there are too many voices trying to entertain you, but very few that want to see you wake up. Here, we don't sugarcoat the truth. We say it as it is because we trust your maturity, your strength, and your need for true emotional direction. This isn't content to fill the silence. It's a call to decide what you're going to do with the life you have left. And believe me, that's no small thing. Subscribe if you feel this conversation can't end here. Be part of this community that isn't looking for easy comfort, but for real clarity. Share this video with someone who's still living by giving in, by explaining, by holding on to things that were never theirs to carry. Because sometimes, one sentence spoken with clarity can plant a decision that changes the entire course of a life. And if you still have the strength to keep reflecting, stay right here. Watch one of the videos that will appear on screen, because transformation doesn't happen in a single day. It's a process, one that only begins when you stop living by dimming your light and finally start living from the truth of who you really are. I'll see you soon.